Hello again. Time to put into practice some of the terms we learned in the previous sentences and clauses video. Let's start with this first sentence. Charles watches baseball and basketball. Pause the video here to see how many parts of the sentence you can identify. Welcome back. Let's start diagramming things together. Charles watches baseball and basketball. We have three nouns here: Charles, baseball, and basketball. We also have a verb, watches. Who is doing the watching? Charles is doing the watching. Our first noun, therefore, is the subject. The other two nouns, baseball and basketball, together constitute the object that Charles is watching. Because Charles is watching baseball and basketball, and not say just simply watching, we can tell that this is a transitive use of the verb. We also know then that the watches plus baseball and basketball constitute the predicate that correspond with the subject Charles. Charles watches baseball and basketball. A relatively straightforward sentence. Let's move on to something a little bit more complex. The parrot and the dog talk to each other all day. Pause the video here and then push play again when you think you've figured everything out. Welcome back. Let's try to diagram this sentence together. The parrot and the dog talk to each other all day. We have two, maybe 2.5 nouns here. The parrot and the dog are relatively straightforward. Other, however, is a little bit different. We know that there's something that has to come on the other end of the verb talk. Let's get to other in just a moment. The word the in the very first noun is what's called a definite article. Again, this is in contrast to an indefinite article such as a or an. We also have a definite article with the second noun, the dog. Now let's get to other. Other is what's called a pronoun. You don't necessarily have to know that yet, or ever really. Pronouns are useful though because they can stand in for people on the other end of a verb. As we said, the verb in this sentence is talk. The things that are doing the talking are the parrot and the dog. We can therefore say that the parrot and the dog, as one distinct unit, constitutes the subject of the verb, which is to talk. Now, we've identified other as somewhat of an object of the verb talk. We have a word each here, which is modifying other. This is what's called a determiner. Together, this constitutes the indirect object of the verb to talk. We know this is an indirect object because of the preposition to. You don't need to know the distinction between direct and indirect objects. This is all just to say that the indirect object of the verb talk is to each other. Because the verb talk has an object, even though it's an indirect one, we know then that the verb talk is being used transitively. Since we've identified the subject, which is the parrot and the dog, we can say the rest of the sentence, generally speaking, is the predicate. That's the whole sentence. The parrot and the dog talk to each other all day. Let's try a third sentence. Porcupines are prickly and chinchillas are soft. Pause the video and we can pick it back up on the other end. All right, now we're back. Let's get to our sentence. Porcupines are prickly and chinchillas are soft. This is kind of a freaky sentence because potentially it's kind of actually two sentences in one. We know this because we can break up the entire thing into two distinct chunks, one clause and then another. The first clause is porcupines are prickly, and the second one is chinchillas are soft. We can imagine that these are two separate sentences because they stand alone together. As we discussed in our previous video, there are a few essential elements of each independent clause. Let's take a closer look at the first one. We have one noun, porcupines. On the other side of the verb is the word prickly. Now, generally speaking, we would say the word prickly is an adjective. Because the adjective is on the other side of the verb, it's acting almost as if it's an object. The verb is are. The predicate of the first clause is are prickly. When adjectives are used on the other side of the verb in this way, when they act, in other words, as objects, we call them predicate adjectives. More on these in a moment. In the first clause, again, the predicate is are prickly. The subject that is prickly is porcupines. In the first clause, then, our subject is porcupines and our predicate is are prickly. Our second clause has another one of these predicate adjectives. There's one noun in our second clause. That noun is chinchillas. On the other side of the verb is another predicate adjective. Again, our verb is are, chinchillas, the noun, is our subject, and then the rest of the clause is our predicate, so are soft. Now, more on these predicate adjectives. If we take the second clause, we have chinchillas are soft. Again, soft is the predicate adjective here. Usually, when we think of adjectives, we think of them modifying the noun. And in English, when adjectives modify nouns, they usually go before the noun that they modify. In this normal usage, we call them attributive adjectives because they modify the noun and therefore act as an attribute of that noun. Transposing the structure allows us to see the distinction between the two a little bit more clearly. If we put soft in front of chinchillas, which is actually the adjective it modifies, then we can see that the attribute soft modifies the word chinchillas. This is why when adjectives act as objects and function as such in the predicate section of a sentence, they're called predicate adjectives, as we mentioned, but then when you transpose them, they're attributive adjectives because they actually act as an attribute, again, of the noun that they modify. In this case, chinchillas are soft. Soft is the attribute of most chinchillas. Let's have one last sentence. The tired friends came home. Pause the video, you know the drill. Press play when you're ready. Welcome back. We have our sentence. This is the last one. The tired friends came home. We have two nouns here, the tired friends and home. Let's take them one by one. The first word is a definite article. We already know this. Again, this is in distinction to indefinite articles, such as a or an. Then we get an adjective, tired. Adjective is modifying the actual noun, which is friends. Tired, the adjective, is placed just before the noun. In this way, it acts as an attribute of the friends. The friends weren't happy or jovial, they were tired, presumably because they'd spent a night out, having fun with one another. The full noun phrase is the tired friends. That's our subject. We'll get to that in just a moment. Let's go to our second noun, home. This is the object of our verb, which is came. Came home is the predicate that corresponds to the subject, which is the tired friends. That's our last sentence. The tired friends came home. In order to get a bit more practice with the concepts we've discussed today, I encourage you to write down sentences you come across in your daily lives and then break them down in the same way that we've done here. That's all for now. Bye-bye.